Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today's video is going to be a little bit different, in which it's going to be a budget video where the whole idea is I take a particular budget and then I try to make the best possible deck I can out of that budget. So the budget that I'm working with today is about $20-ish, and this deck realistically shouldn't cost you $20-ish. This is more realistically about a $10 deck, just because of all of the commons and uncommons that are in the deck, and I feel like black is a really good budget deck for the 1.0 meta, because all of its good base cards are in the common and uncommon slot, and we could really start to build some pretty interesting and pretty powerful stuff just with this base. First up, starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Guardraman. Guardraman is just the best black Digitama we have currently, so it only makes sense to run him. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Guardraman. So Guardraman is that value vanilla card, no other explanation needed. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gatsuman. So Gatsuman is pretty unique in the fact that he is a rookie with the blocker ability. So this allows us to have a very cheap and efficient blocker to just be able to play whenever we really need an extra blocker out. Next up, I'm running 4 copies of Toy Agamon. Toy Agamon is probably the most important card in the entire deck because he has the inheritable ability of giving Reboot. So Reboot is a very powerful ability where you basically can unsuspend the Digimon during the opponent's unsuspend phase, so it has a whole bunch of different utilities and applications. Then the last rookie I'm running in the deck is 4 copies of Chuman. So Chuman is pretty interesting because he has a nice passive ability during both players' turns. The opponent can't gain memory except by tamer effects. So this could potentially turn off a whole bunch of different cards and different abilities, and that's just something really powerful to sit on and limit what the opponent could possibly be playing. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Numamon because Numamon is just another value-efficient vanilla card. So he is very cheap to play for his level. He is very cheap to digivolve into for his level, and that's really the only reasons why that we would run him, is he is just overall that just very value efficient card to get into our higher stages with faster. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So Greymon's pretty nice because he has this nice inheritable ability where while this Digimon has Reboot, it also gains Jamming. So for those who don't know what Jamming is, it is the ability which Digimon can't be deleted by security battles with the opponent's security Digimon. So this kind of acts as like protection for our higher levels. So that way they don't get deleted by a Digimon that might be stronger than them in the opponent's security. And this card really only works in the deck because we have Toy Agamon to give whatever we want Reboot. Then the last champion of the deck is going to be Guardraman at 4 copies. So Guardraman is just our blocker for the deck and our blocker for the champion stage, because having a champion blocker is just very good, especially when Guardraman has some slightly higher DP than some of the other blockers. The only downside is he can't attack, but most of the time we're not really looking to attack with him anyway. Next up, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Dramon. So Dramon is a pretty good ultimate because he has the blocker ability and he can attack. So that way, if we really wanted to, we could have Toy Agamon as an inheritable source for him, and then we have a good blocker Reboot card in the ultimate stage. Then the last ultimate I'm going to be running in the deck is 4 copies of Metal Greymon. So Metal Greymon is pretty decent because not only does he have Reboot innately, so he kind of just works with some of our other cards like our Greymon and our Guardraman, but he also has this really powerful inheritable ability where if the Digimon has Reboot, then it also gains security attack +1. So again, this is kind of why Toy Agamon is just so important to the deck, is because the whole idea is to build Toy Agamon, Greymon, Metal Greymon into a Mega, and then have that Mega basically be our win condition. And speaking of our Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of High Dramon because High Dramon is just another value vanilla card where he just is really cheap and efficient to digivolve into him. Then our last Mega, and preferably our main Mega of the deck, is going to be 4 copies of Metal Agamon. So Metal Agamon has 2 really decent abilities. His first ability is that this Digimon can't be blocked by any of your opponent's Digimon. So having an unblockable Digimon is really, really powerful, especially if we have him fully stacked with the whole Greymon line, where he'll have Reboot from Toy Agamon, Jamming from Greymon, and Security Tech +1 from Metal Greymon. So he could potentially hit very, very hard and be very, very hard for the opponent to deal with because they can't even block his attacks. And then on top of which, he also has another ability where during the opponent's turn, this Digimon gets a plus 2000 DP. The plus 2000 DP is really nice just to get him to be a little bit harder to interact with on the opponent's turn. He is going to be the main win condition of our deck with a fully stacked Greymon line underneath him, and he is just a very fantastic Digimon on a budget. Next, on to the option cards. I'm running 4 copies of Looking Back on the Good Times. So Looking Back on the Good Times is probably a very underrated card. I love this card a lot. What it does is its main ability is you get to de-digivolve one of the opponent's Digimon. And then if that Digimon's cost is 4 or less, then you just straight up get to delete it. So this is not only a good way to de-digivolve the opponent's Digimon, but it also could potentially act as removal depending on when and how you play it, which removal is always very, very good, and the fact that black kind of lacks removal makes this card a little bit more worthwhile to run. And then its security effect is adding this card into your hand, so that way you could then have access to play this the next turn. And then as far as the Tamer card of the deck goes, I'm only going to be running 2 copies of Tai Kamiya because this is a budget deck after all, and Tai Kamiya is a rare, so he's going to be a little bit harder to get. But he shouldn't be that hard or expensive to get regardless, and he's really good because he has this nice ability where he could fix your memory. If your memory is 2 or less, you get to set it to 3, so he prevents memory deprivation. And then on top of which, he also has a nice passive ability where during the opponent's turn, all of your black Digimon get plus 1000 DP, making it that much harder for the opponents to kind of just deal with some of your Digimon. And then as far as other cards that you could possibly run, you could think about running Mega Dramon. Mega Dramon is another vanilla card. It isn't exactly the most efficient vanilla card, but the slightly higher DP does make it a little bit better to aggro with it than Andromon. You could also think about running Spider Shoot, where if you really don't feel like Looking Back at the Good Times is doing enough for you, then Spider Shoot is also pretty good because it has that same de-digivolve 1 ability. It's just it doesn't delete the opponent's Digimon, and I prefer to try to delete the opponent's Digimon rather than just shrink it. But shrinking it is also very, very important sometimes, and the big difference is also that this triggers its main effect from the security, where Looking Back at the Good Times only triggers it from the hand. You could also think about running Spiral Sword, so I'm not super thrilled with Spiral Sword because I'm just generally not super thrilled with just DP boost option cards, but it also has another really good security ability where you get to unsuspend one of your Digimon with blocker. We are running a lot of different blockers in the deck, so Spiral Sword could potentially save us some extra damage by making us unsuspend a blocker, but I'm not super thrilled with this card or the ability, but it is a decent one to think about nonetheless. And then if you're willing to go a little bit more into the rare cards, then you could also run Infinity Cannon, because Infinity Cannon is pretty decent because it has de-digivolve 4 on one of your opponent's Digimon. Again, it's not removing the Digimon, so I'm not exactly super thrilled with it, but de-digivolve 4 is a lot more powerful than de-digivolve 1, just because you shrink it all the way down to basically level 3 if you can, and that really could set the opponent far back on tempo, just because now they're going to have to work that Digimon all the way back up. And then it also has a nice security effect of being able to trigger its main effect. And then if you really feel like you want to run a 5th Digitama, then Sunamon is also pretty okay. I'm not super thrilled with the card, but he's just a good 5th Digitama for the deck if you just want to get one. You could also think about running the starter deck at Tai Kamiya. So the starter deck Tai Kamiya is pretty interesting because he just has the passive ability of giving all of your Digimon plus 1000 DP during your turn. and then combo that with the black Taikamiya, and all of your black Digimon will get plus 1000 DP during the opponent's turn. So in combination with the two ties, it's almost like a permanent 1000 DP buff, which could make it very, very hard for the opponent to interact with your Digimon more efficiently. You could also think about running Skull Greymon. So Skull Greymon is great because he has this nice on-play ability, so we don't need to digivolve up into him to play the card, where his on-play ability is just leading one of the opponent's Digimon with blocker. So that's just a pretty decent ability to have overall because it allows us to push for more aggressive lines anyway, in case we don't see Metal Agamon. You could also think about running Volcanic Dramon for a very similar reason why we're playing Skull Greymon, because he has this nice on-play ability to just be able to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So again, because he has this on-play ability, we don't need to digivolve up into him, and then he also innately has Security Attack +1, so he could also help us with some of our aggression. You could also think about running Puppetmon because, again, same reason as all of the other Digimon that have on-play abilities, we don't need to digivolve up into them to play the card. And Puppetmon is very, very powerful because his on-play ability suspends one of the opponent's Digimon down and then stun locks all of the opponent's Digimon from unsuspending. So, again, it allows us to aggress even harder on the opponent. And then another on-play mega that you could also think about running would be Magnadramon, where if you're running low on security, then you just slam down a Magnadramon, then its on-play ability will just let you recover 2 if you have 3 or fewer security cards left. We don't really care about its on-attacking, we just care about the fact that it can gain us 2 security, which is pretty decent. So overall, I think the deck is a pretty interesting budget deck. Again, the vast majority of the cards are commons and uncommons, so realistically, it shouldn't cost you that much money in order to build this deck. Again, I estimate the deck's value to be roughly around $10 to $20 as of the recording of this video, given the cards that you actually use and the seller you're buying the cards from. And on top of which, Metal Agamon is a pretty interesting mega to run just because he has the unblockable ability, and then again stack him with all of the inheritable skills from the Greymon line, and he could be a very, very potent threat that the opponent is going to have to figure out how to deal with. So if you like my content and want to help support the channel, I do have a TCG Player affiliate link down in the description below. Whenever you use that link to purchase your cards off of tcgplayer.com, some of the money will go towards supporting the channel. And on top of that, I also have partnered with Overcard Gamers over on Facebook. I do make and design some playmats, and they are kind enough to partner with me to print the designs that I've been making. On top of which, if you mention my channel, you'll get $2 off at any of my playmat designs. And that's kind of all I have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.